So welcome back, everyone. So this is part of Summer Institute. We've got a special session with Nicole, who's going to be talking through how to use trends to problem solve and forecast problems. Nicole has a really interesting background when it comes to designing solutions, spotting trends, how to really hone in on a particular problem, and also using data to solve that problem. So I'm going to pass it over to Nicole. Thank you so much for being part of it today and presenting for Summer Institute. I'm sure the students appreciate it.
Perfect. So I'm Nicole Agba. I am a colour materials designer by trade, but also do a lot of trend forecasting as part of my job. So a little bit of a background around me. I went to Coventry University in 2010 and studied automotive and transport design. During my degree, I looked to specialise in colour materials design, and I'll touch on, as I go through this talk, why that area and aspect could be of interest to you. What I did just before I graduated was I founded my own trend forecasting blog, which is called the Trend Tome, where I look at what trends are coming up. I look at solving problems. Most of this is related to color and materials, but it's also related to architecture, product design, and automotive. That same year, I won the Autocar-Courland Next Generation Award for an idea surrounding how we can use colour and materials to help make our roads safer in Britain. Following this experience, I ended up making some really good contacts and connections with people on the awards programme and ended up undertaking an internship at the Advanced Propulsion Centre, which is based in Coventry, as a visitor experience designer. This again sort of links into what you probably heard earlier today, but what my role at that company was to design experiences. So we had a big exhibition area, and it was looking at how to increase the number of visitors to the area, but also looking at how we can outsource it for other things and what would attract customers to that part of the business. Following this experience, and again through contacts and connections from the Autocar Award, I went on to land my first job at McLaren doing colour materials design. After about 2 years there, I opened my own business, Nicole Agba Designs, and started undertaking contract work for clients such as Dyson and currently Lotus. Next slide, please. So touching back on what I do for a living, what I do is I design solutions for clients. My recent clients have been Dyson and Lotus, as well as I've worked for McLaren in the past. And the picture you see there is me, my first baby, the McLaren Senna, which was the first production car I'd ever worked on. As well as designing these solutions, I trend forecast and problem solve. So in design, we have a brief, a client, a market, a country of who we're designing for, and we look together to pull information and research on what is suitable for that area. Trend forecasting is one of the ways that we do that, because some trends are specific to regions, some trends are specific to age, and we can use this to solve problems. Next slide. So trends are important to everybody. The main reason that they're important is because they can be tailored. As I just touched on previously, trends can be related to region, they can also be related to gender, and they can be related to age. The advantage of this is that you can use the trends that you see to help fulfill a brief. Trends can be used in two ways. One way is that they can highlight a problem that you need to solve, and the other is that they can be a solution to a problem that you have. One advantage with megatrends is that you can use them to seek out issues that may not exist currently, and you can also use them as the answer to a problem that you currently have. So I'm going to take you through an example of when I've spotted a trend and identified a megatrend, and how I then use this to solve a problem. So back in 2018, I did a bit of a trend study as part of the Trend Tome. And one of the mega trends that I identified was one that I called Feel the Green, which ties into the trends that I heard that you talked about earlier today. Sustainability and mindfulness and conservation of energy, as well as color tones, are all really big trends that we've started to see. And I've enveloped all of those into something that I call Feel the Green. What I noticed in part of the further trend study that I'm putting together is that this isn't a new trend. It's actually one we've seen from the early 2010s, and one we'll continue to see for the next couple of years. And it highlights on smaller trends that are making their way up the chain. So mega trends work two ways. You can have smaller socioeconomic trends, climate trends that all build up to make one big mega trend, but also mega trends split out into these smaller things. So I've highlighted things like veganism, things like mental health awareness, changes in society, and all of these have an impact on what we do in our future. For me, they've had an impact, especially things like veganism has had a massive impact on the automotive sector. And one of the things that we've from identifying this mega trend is looking for solutions to be able to provide materials for customers that are vegan, but also provide materials that are suitable for the environment. So I'll take you on to the next slide. So the main question you need to ask yourself is, what are you looking for? Are you looking for a problem, or are you looking for a solution? A little project I tasked myself with was looking for what does luxury mean in 2020. So this was back in 2018. It was a question I posed to myself. I'm looking for a solution in this task. What does the future of luxury mean? And what I identified is that the future of luxury, it's honing in on smaller trends that I had noticed. Things like connectivity is a big thing, minimalistic design, cues to nature, and customization. Those are all big things that will shape what luxury will mean in the future, and what luxury is starting to mean. Before, it used to mean having precious metals or having lots of leather or expensive items, and now it's about creating solutions that are beneficial to the environment, solutions that can be changed and amended and have malleability, and solutions that allow us to connect to technology and connect to the wider world. I'll go on to the next slide. The big thing to do after you've asked yourself the question is to do your research. So being a color materials designer, I've specifically honed in on these three areas to research: materials, colors, and surface treatments, that I've then pulled and have been influenced by the sub-trends within the mega trends that I've identified. Through this, I've looked at different materials, different ways of processing that allows customization. So for example, using something like an etching gives you the opportunity to create products that both have an etch and don't have an etch within the same tooling, which links in again with the mega trend of feel the green, because by using one set of tooling, you're spending less, you're building less tools, which is then using less fossil fuel. So in that way, it's better for the environment. But then you're also answering the client's question of customization. And then if I jump to the last slide, what you can then do after you've asked the question and done your research is look to propose a design solution. So through the trend research that I did based off of the original megatrend, I've then looked at creating a product that has different materials on it designed to meet some of the requirements of those trends. So one of them is using a material called Dynamica, which is a microfiber suede from Mico, which is made from recycled plastic bottles. This satisfies the need for reusability, sustainability in material, because it's made of waste. Otherwise, that waste would go to landfill. As well as using things like an eco-based plastic for the base, instead of something that can then again return to landfill, and then producing a design solution from this. And there are multiple design solutions that you can pull together from your trends, because one thing to notice, especially about sustainability and veganism, is that they're not always hand in hand, though they fall under the same umbrella of megatrend. Just because something is vegan doesn't necessarily make it sustainable. For example, switching from leathers to a plastic-based material, you're using more plastics, and energy usage in making recycled materials can sometimes be more than those to make traditional materials from leather. So what you can also do is, from this research, is tailor what it is that you're actually looking for. Are you looking for something vegan friendly? Yes, that's a solution that you can find through this megatrend. Or are you looking for something sustainable? Or are you looking for something that overlaps the two? What you can do from a challenge like this, and following this kind of process, is highlight areas in which you have overlap, and also helps you define what question it is that you actually want answered. And I think that's the last slide. So open to questions.
Thank you so much, Nicole, for running through that quickly. What springs to mind is actually what really shines out from this actually is how you're using all of that research and snippets from different trends, and then pulling it together for that end solution, that, or at least prototype that you showed, which I think is actually ideally what the students should hopefully get out of this week-long process. Is actually, we're at that stage where we're looking at different problems and we'll look at different trends, and then by the end of the program, your solution can kind of touch upon it and solve for them problems, but also take into account things like sustainability in the materials that you use, etc. So I'll open it up for any questions. Ideally, we'll take questions which are by audio first, and then I'll check the Slack group just in case there's any others.
I have a question. It's Olivia here.
Hiya.
Hi, how are you?
All right, thank you.
Good. I just wanted to start a question to probably make it easier for the students to ask the question too. It's always scary going first. I have two questions. Well, first of all, thanks so much for breaking down the method in trying to find a megatrend and turn it into a workable solution for a client or for your own endeavor. I have two questions which probably help the students. The first question is, what sources do you use to do your searching? So to finding trends, do you look through data? Do you go through specific websites? And the second question I have is, once you have got your first WIP, so your first work in progress, what do you do to get to the second version? What are there specific things that you're looking at? So those two questions will be great to have answers to.
Well, the first one is about what sources that I use. I have a few favorites of other trend forecasters that I tend to flock to. One of them is WGSN, which is a global trend forecasting company. I also look at what PSK are also doing. They're based in New York, and they're again another trend forecasting company. I also notice, I also keep log of Fashion Week, both New York, London, and Paris, because what you tend to find in automotive, in general automotive, you tend to work to a 5-year scale from concept to final production. In sports cars, where I work, it's quite a lot shorter than that. It's about half the time. So what it means is that when you work for a company that's on a 5-year long program, the trend that you're identifying, you need to realize it 5 years before it's going to come into effect. And when you work on a smaller scale program, you can work to sort of more micro trends. So companies like Fiat work quite rapidly through their trend process, whereas companies like Jaguar Land Rover tend to work on a 5-year long program. So right now they're developing colors that will get used on cars in 5 years' time. They've started the work on that now. So what you tend to do is you go to design shows. So I go to a variety of design shows, Surface Design Show, I go to London Design Fair, a bunch of different outlets, because I think what's important to do is to gather research from every entity and not specifically hone in on your field. Because if I just only looked at automotive trends, I would see the same things. But what I've noticed is that if you go to a show about architecture, you can draw inspiration from the way that they process something and bring that into your field. So shows, other forecasting websites I look at, but also just a lot of ground field research. So I will tend to go to a few dealerships or go for a bit of a walk around a car park. So if you ever see me leering into your car, I'm not trying to steal it. I'm just trying to see what you've got on your interior. Because things like that you pick up and you can trace that back to when the car was made, and is that going to be a trend that you think will come round again? So those tend to be my sources for research. And then can you remind me of the second question?
Yeah, sure. So it's just how you get from the first prototype for your design to the second version. Is there anything you do specifically there? Is there anything that you recommend, especially for the students now?
So I tend to, before I get to that first, so the work in progress you saw was probably attempt number 8 of quite a few attempts of working through. I think the key is understanding what it is that you actually want to say. So when I asked what question are you asking, like what is the problem, that's quite an important one, because that will direct you to sort of like your first route. And then what I would then do with information with something like that is I would show it to somebody who is probably more senior than me, or somebody I respect in my same field, and ask them for opinions. So I think it's always important, and it's good practice to seek out mentors in your field, and people that you trust, colleagues and co-workers as well. Ask them what they think. Do they think it's a good idea? Because you'll find out some feedback quite quickly and early on at that stage. So if I was at university, that would be my lecturers or students in the class that I knew that were quite good. I would ask them their opinions as well.
So we've had a question come in from James. James, I want to offer you a chance. Do you want to read it out yourself, or I can? I would take that as shy, and I will do. So James is asking, how do you handle garbage data? By that, I mean, how do you isolate data or a data set to determine what data would be more applicable to your trend study, and what would more likely lead you down a wild goose chase?
Yeah, that's quite a big question, because I guess the data that I work with is less numerical. So it's easier, for me, it's mostly visual things. So it's easier for me to assess whether it's useful information or non-useful information. However, I think that one thing you can do is we do a lot of competitive benchmarking in design. So if we want to try something new or propose a new propose a new idea, one thing we'll do is look at what other companies are there that are like us and what are they doing. If we're saying something similar, then we know we're probably on the right track. Or if we say, if what we're proposing is something that they have been proposing for a number of years, then it's probably an old trend and we're working behind ourselves. I think in terms of if you have masses and masses of data, it would be trying to pinpoint and focus your question. So if your question is, if you're trying to find out what trends are there for Asian women or Chinese women who are under 50, you've already set yourself parameters of things to look for by gender and by age and by country. So I think it's finding things that will help narrow your criteria, that will help narrow your search, might give you a good starting point. I hope that answers the question to some effect.
Hi. Yeah, my mic wasn't seem to working for a while. Yeah, that answers my question. Thanks.
No problem.
Just as you was talking about fashion shows, I believe it's PepsiCo used to have like a big, used to go to like Milan fashion show or some type of design conference, because although it's a different industry than the food and beverage industry, it's all about kind of trend spotting and user experience. So I really loved your point around how do you learn from other industries.
Yeah, fashion is very, very important, especially fashion related to color, because what you'll find is that a color that you end up seeing at like Milan Fashion Week, what would have been this year, you'll probably end up seeing as a body color on cars in about 4 years' time, because it's taken that long for the trend to move from one industry to the next. However, if you went into something like mobile phones or technology, you'll see that trend appear in the next year much quicker.
Do we have any more questions that people want to ask vocally? Because I know Nicole's got to go any minute.
It doesn't have to be related to trends either. It could be questions about internships, because I understand that part of Summer Institute is that there might be some internships on the table. So if there's any questions around do's and don'ts or any advice kind of questions, I'm happy to answer those as well.
So from what I know of Nicole, your experience, you actually had an opportunity where you got to experience multiple multiple companies in one go. Can you share any quick tips that you had about how do you make the most of those situations and build your network?
Yeah, so I think one thing I'm annoyed at myself that it took me a while to learn, but I did eventually get there in the end. And I think the first one, especially, I was fresh out of uni, graduate in a company like Jaguar Land Rover, which is a huge company and one that I wanted to work for. I found myself quite overwhelmed. But one thing I would say, and a lesson learned, is to speak up more. Because by the time I got to my placement at McLaren, I was very comfortable and I was speaking up a lot. And it was through making really good connections that I ended up actually landing my future job there. And I always wonder if I had been a bit more vocal in my first internship, things I could have also had an opportunity there as well. So one thing I would say is to be vocal. The other thing I would say is to have some sort of portfolio or CV prepared and build a relationship with somebody who could be a mentor, that would stand you in good stead for years. When updating a CV for potential jobs, they'll be able to give you some advice. And then the other one, which I had told Ryan and Olivia about, was on an internship that I had whilst I was still at uni. They'd like to do like tea and coffee rounds because it was a smaller company, and they'd noticed every time when someone asked if anyone wanted a hot drink, I'd say no thank you, that's okay, I was fine. And then during the middle of the week, someone pointed out to me and they said, you should ask for something, even if you don't want anything, ask for something, because then you'll become memorable. You'll become memorable as the person who always has tea and 2 sugars. What you kind of want to do is put yourself in a position where people talk about you even when you're not there. And that small step is one way of doing it.
I love that tip, just because I'm known as the person who doesn't have tea or coffee, but I have a Capri Sun instead. So it's a very good tip. And we've got a question from Maureen, but do you want to say it in person? Because I think I'm echoing.
Hi there, Nicole. My question was there something that prompted you to go on your own, to start your own company rather than stay as an employee?
I'd always contracted from my first job. So colour and materials design tends to be a contract-based role. Unless you're a manager or something, then they offer more permanent positions. So it's purely just because of the industry and the climate that I work in, and it made more sense to do that self-employed. So nothing more than that. But also what I would like to do is expand the business further and look at doing having trend forecasting as part of that, as well as take on some consultancy work as well. So it also gives you options to both work for companies but also do your own work as well.
I think a great place to as a call to action is actually to check out your blog, and also I think just gain some inspiration from what looks like Pinterest boards that you've created.
I would note that I haven't written anything new in 2 years, just because automotive is very busy. But yeah, feel free to take a look and see what you think. I'm in the middle of writing a series on sustainable brands and products, which I'm hoping to publish by the end of the year.
Oh, great. Very topical as well. We were just talking about sustainability earlier. Within finance, it cuts across everywhere, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for joining and taking up what I think is your lunch break. We really do appreciate it. And are you happy for, I guess, the students to contact you elsewhere? I assume you're on LinkedIn. Yeah,
I'm on LinkedIn, and my email address is on there as well. So feel free to drop me a line on LinkedIn or send me an email with any questions, and I'm more than happy to help.
Great. Thank you so much, Nicole, for joining.
No problem. Cheers, everyone. Thanks.
Bye.